This is part 2 of our Christmas special about one of the most forgotten theaters and most forgotten actions of the war. Today we'll see some of the real chaos of the Caucasus post-Russian Revolution and some real adventure by the Caspian Sea. I'm Indy Neidell. Welcome to part 2 of this year's Great War Christmas Special, The Adventures of Dunster Force, the Hush Hush Army, as written by General Lionel Dunsterville. In part 1, we saw the force try and fail to reach Tiflis, Tbilisi, or Baku, but gain Cossack allies, nearly be taken by the Bolshevik Red Guard, provide essential famine relief, and have those Cossack allies help stymie Mirza Kuchik Khan, would-be ruler of Persia. When we left off, Dunsterville was at the port of Enzeli on the Caspian Sea, making deals with the local Bolshevik committee, and Colonel Bisharikov and his Cossacks, claiming they were Bolsheviks, were hoping to stop the advancing Ottomans by taking the Kura Bridge together with Bolshevik-controlled Baku's local Red Army. If the Ottomans captured Baku, they would have big stores of oil to run the Caucasian Railway and the Black Sea shipping. They would also have control of the Caspian Sea and an open door to Afghanistan and Asia. On the other hand, if the British could secure Baku, this would close the door to Central Asia for the enemy, stop the local railways, and gain control of the Caspian Sea. By mid-July, Dunsterville from Enzeli was in daily contact with the social revolutionaries in Baku, and it seemed that soon they could bring off a coup against the Bolsheviks and set up a pro-British government. He finally got news of Bisharikov, but all hope of securing the bridge was gone, as the Red Army there, who were revolutionaries and not soldiers, just wouldn't do its job. They gave ground without firing a shot, and Bisharikov could only count on his men, so he fell back to Baku. So the Bolsheviks then realized Bisharikov isn't really one of them and are trying to push him into the arms of the Turks. He figures this out and soon abandons the town entirely and heads to Derbend. Now this turns out to be a bad decision, because if he had waited for just a few days for the Dunster force to arrive, then Baku would never have fallen. Dunsterville's men were now trickling in from Mesopotamia, but Kuchik Khan's Jangalis were going to try a new attack. They did this July 20th at the Battle of Resht on the Enzeli Road. They sent their best men to attack the British detachment based outside of town while simultaneously taking the town. The attacks on the detachment were beaten off, and of the 2,500 Jangalis attacking, 100 were killed and 50 or so taken prisoner. The British took 50 casualties roughly, but now the Jangalis held the town. 2 days of street fighting and aerial bombardment cleared them out. The entire road to the Caspian was now open, and Mirza Kuchik Khan began to sue for peace, but Enzeli had to be secured. So Dunsterville invited the Enzeli Bolshevik Committee of 3 to Kasvin and arrested them on charges of complicity with the Jangalis, the only thing for which they could theoretically be arrested, since they had killed a bunch of Russians on the road, and that was certainly against Persian law. He had a letter from 19-year-old committee member Babuk congratulating Kuchik Khan on his attempts to beat the British and promising future support as proof. If this isn't all complicated enough, on July 26 came the coup in Baku, and the new governing body was the Centro-Caspian Dictatorship, who called Dunsterville for help. He had now established control over Enzeli port, which the locals apparently had no problem with, and managed to secure 1,000-ton ship there, the President Kruger, that could hold 800 men, and 2 smaller ships at Baku, 3 of the best ships on the Caspian Sea. Headquarters was transferred to the Kruger August 10th. Dunsterville took down the red flag and put up the Russian flag, but the locals were worried that this was counter-revolutionary activity. He assured them that this was not the case, but he was not a revolutionary either and wouldn't fly the red flag, so they compromised by flying the Russian flag upside down. This meant that the force sailed the Caspian Sea under the Serbian flag, since the locals were not aware that it's the same as the Russian flag upside down. So, you now had a British general sailing on the Caspian Sea aboard a ship named after a South African Boer president of partly German descent, sailing from a Persian port under a Serbian flag to assist a body of Armenians in a revolutionary Russian town against the Turks. You genuinely cannot make this stuff up. Dunsterville arrived in Baku the 17th to find a city on the verge of starvation. The population of the oil city was around 300,000, mainly Armenians, Tartars, and Russians, with smaller colonies of Georgians and Greeks, and even smaller numbers of British, French, and Americans. The countryside was totally barren, leaflessly barren, except for the avenues of trees grown in the city with a new water supply, and the surrounding villages, which were basically oases. The five dictators, requested a meeting with Dunsterville just after he sent his force of some 900 men now to the front lines. He describes the dictators as intelligent, zealous, and around 30 years old. The idea of 5 dictators seemed to me absurd, and I suggested they're choosing one of their number as a single dictator. But that did not happen. And I gotta point out that unlike many European leaders of his age and his era, Dunsterville did not think of other races and cultures as inferior. His problem here was their lack of training. Of the local Armenians, he writes, he was not a soldier but just an ill-fed factory hand. A rifle was pushed into his hand and he was told to go and fight. He had no equipment, no proper instructors, no decent officers, and no regular arrangements for food supply. Under such circumstances, no troops could be expected to display a high standard of valor. Plans were begun for possible evacuation of the town, and it was heavily shelled the night of the 23rd. Still, machine guns were reorganized and the Armenian town defenses were gradually shaped up. A peace was signed with Kuchik Khan back at Anzeli, who then became their sole contractor for rice, which was a big boon for Baku. The Turks had, however, attacked Mud Volcano near Baku the 26th and inflicted heavy losses, including killing the British major who was charged with wiring the front. But they failed to break through and take the town. It was obvious that the Great Assault was soon to come. The main problem everywhere, though, was the delay between agreement and action. Everything was done by committee, and every single man had a say. Every battalion has a committee, and so does each company in the battalion. And committee meetings are held during action. But once they've reached a decision, they have no power to enforce it, because, of course, the men do not consider themselves bound by such a decision if they don't personally support it. Dunsterville says that all of this freedom put a stop to any enterprise, and that much of Russia is longing for any form of government that will restore a semblance of law and order. He also says of those fighting the revolution, revolutionaries are quite the least brotherly people towards each other that the world contains, and constitute a living refutation of their fundamental doctrines. The Turks again attacked August 31st. Troops from the town kept in reserve could easily counterattack and carry the day, but this they did not do. Dunsterville by now despaired of the situation, though he says that retreating to the heights south of the railway line could save the city and port, but the local men have to be willing to actually fight, and they weren't. He was asked to attend a council of war that evening. There were the 5 dictators, the Armenian National Council, workmen's delegates, soldiers and sailors delegates, and peasant deputies. General Dukushayev, the local commander-in-chief, gave an address on his strategy and summed up his remarks. Even as he was concluding it, a sailor rose and gave his views. He spoke for an hour and then proposed plans the exact opposite of the commander-in-chief. Then the Armenian National Council proposed a third set of plans. Then the dictators had their plans, then other speakers. And exasperated Dunsterville left at 1 o'clock in the morning while they were still talking. He decided that the situation was unsalvageable, and the next afternoon met the dictators to tell them so. The hush-hush army has done all the fighting, but the men came to help fight, not do all the fighting, and he won't sacrifice their lives needlessly, so he will soon leave Baku. He advises the dictators to send out a flag of truce and sort out peace terms before an invasion can happen, and not waste time making speeches and resolutions. The dictators are thunderstruck, as if the idea of the fall of Baku had never been a possibility for them. Later, Dunsterville returned to headquarters and found the various committees all passing resolutions as fast as they could. Now, while this is ludicrous, he points out that ludicrous situations are not really their fault and would likely arise to a certain extent after any revolution. By this time, though, it should be noted that a big part of the town was eager to replace the dictators with something else. At 4 a.m. September 14th, the final assault on Baku began, and the local troops, for the most part, did not fight, were immediately overrun, and evacuation seemed the only option. However, the Dunster force managed to check the advance at 8 a.m., though counterattack proved impossible. They couldn't fight the whole enemy alone, though, so the order was given for retirement to commence at 8 p.m. The sun set, and the fighting had died down after 14 hours, as both sides were exhausted. The sick and wounded were aboard ship shortly after dark, and they made for Enzeli. By 10 p.m., troops and guns were aboard the Kruger. 2 dictators arrived and demanded the British return to its fighting line positions. Dunsterville said that after 14 hours fighting with no relief or support, that's not possible. The dictators say they will sink the ships. Dunsterville says, I hope not. They made it safely to Enzeli. Fewer than 1,000 men had kept a force 10 times their size at bay for nearly a month. The local Baku artillery had actually been great, but it was the Dunster force that had held the town. Casualties had been 180, about a fifth of the force. Once beyond Enzeli, the adventure of the Dunster force comes to an end. Here are a few of Dunsterville's own words about revolution. It is extremely easy to break down an existing form of government, but to build up anything substantial in its place is a matter of considerable difficulty, and a long period of disorder must ensue, during which the best efforts of the best men will not suffice to prevent ridiculous situations from arising. That's pretty short but sweet, and it certainly helps explain the Baku situation in the summer of 1918, a situation of absurdity following revolution. We thought this 2-part tale of revolution, chaos, and adventure might make a bit more upbeat Christmas special than last year's, and we hope you enjoyed it. But don't forget, a lot of people died here from all sides, and even post-revolution, they were still casualties of the Great War. Now, I definitely encourage you to read The Adventures of Dunsterville, and you can find a link to that in the description below. If you missed part 1 of our Dunster Force adventure, you can click right here for that. Do not forget to subscribe. See you next time, which might be next year. Right.